The first gunshot shattered the glass doors of Mercy Valley Hospital just after midnight. Patients screamed. Nurses dropped clipboards. A gurney rolled sideways and crashed into the wall. 3 men in black tactical gear stormed through the entrance with rifles raised. "Everyone on the ground!" one of them shouted. The waiting room froze. A mother clutched her child. An elderly man slowly lowered himself onto the floor. 2 nurses backed against the reception desk, trembling. The leader stepped forward calmly, scanning the room. His voice was cold. "We're looking for one man. Cooperate, and nobody gets hurt." Most people were too terrified to move. But across the room, one woman didn't react the way everyone else did. She stood behind the nurse's station, wearing light blue scrubs. Her name badge read, Elena Carter. To the hospital staff, she was just the quiet night shift nurse who worked too many hours and spoke too little. But Elena Carter wasn't panicking. She was watching. Her eyes moved carefully across the room, counting. 3 gunmen in the lobby, 2 more at the entrance, another outside covering the parking lot. Her breathing remained slow, controlled. One of the gunmen noticed her staring. "You!" he barked, pointing his rifle. "On the floor!" The other nurses immediately dropped down. Elena didn't. She slowly raised her hands and lowered herself to one knee. Inside her mind, something old and dangerous had just awakened. Because Elena Carter knew exactly who these men were. And more importantly, they had just made a very serious mistake. While the gunman forced everyone down, Elena's eyes drifted toward the hallway leading to the emergency wing. Room 14. That's where the patient was. The man who had arrived 30 minutes earlier, bleeding and half-conscious. Marcus Hale. The moment Elena had seen his injuries, she had known something was wrong. Not just a normal accident. The wounds were precise, tactical, military. And when she leaned close to check his pulse, he had grabbed her wrist suddenly. His voice had been weak but urgent. "They found me," he whispered. Elena leaned closer. "Who found you?" His eyes widened with fear. "They're coming." Now they were here. Back in the waiting room, the leader stepped forward again. His eyes scanned the room carefully. "Elena Carter," he said suddenly. Her head tilted slightly. He smiled. "Yes, we know who works here." The room went silent. Elena kept her voice calm. "What do you want?" The man lifted his rifle slightly. "We're looking for a patient who arrived about 30 minutes ago. Male, early 40s, gunshot wound." Marcus. Elena knew exactly where this was going. "I don't know anything about that," she said quietly. The man chuckled. "Wrong answer." One of his men grabbed a doctor from the floor and dragged him forward. The doctor cried out, "Please, I don't know anything." The leader pressed a pistol against the doctor's head. "Let's try again," he said calmly. "Where is Marcus Hale?" Elena's heart remained steady. Her eyes moved toward the hallway again, calculating distance, exits, angles. Because these men thought they had walked into a helpless hospital. They had no idea what kind of battlefield they had just stepped into. And while the gunmen focused on intimidating the staff, Elena slowly slid her hand toward the emergency alarm panel beneath the counter. The lights in the lobby flickered. Then half the building went dark. "What the hell?" one of the gunmen snapped. Another shouted from the entrance, "Power just dropped on 2 floors." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Elena Carter." She looked up at him calmly. "Yes? You did that?" She shrugged slightly. "Old building?" But inside her mind, the mission had already started. Because Elena Carter had once spent 12 years in one of the most classified military units on Earth. a unit that specialized in one thing: turning impossible situations into controlled battlefields. And tonight, Mercy Valley Hospital had just become exactly that. Down the hallway, Marcus Hale slowly opened his eyes in the dark hospital room. Footsteps echoed somewhere in the building, gunshots, shouting. His breathing grew heavier. He knew what this meant. They had found him. But then something else caught his attention. A shadow moved quietly past the glass door of his room. A woman in blue scrubs, moving silently, like a ghost. Marcus whispered to himself. No way, because he recognized that kind of movement. That wasn't a nurse. That was someone trained. Back in the lobby, the leader spoke into his radio. Search the building. He's here. 3 men moved down the hallway with rifles raised. The lights flickered again. One hallway went completely dark. Night vision, one of them muttered. But as the first attacker stepped around the corner, a metal tray suddenly flew across the hallway and smashed into the wall. The gunman spun around. What the? The lights shut off completely. Darkness, silence, then a thud. His radio crackled. Status? No response. Another attacker stepped forward cautiously. Where'd he go? The radio crackled again. Report. Still nothing. And somewhere in the darkness, Elena Carter watched silently, timing, waiting, calculating, because the moment these men walked through the hospital doors, they had unknowingly stepped into the territory of someone who had once survived the deadliest missions the Navy SEALs had ever conducted. And tonight, her past had finally caught up with her. But this time, she wasn't running anymore. Back in the hallway, the second gunman raised his rifle. Something's wrong, he whispered. Behind him, a shadow moved, fast. A hand grabbed his collar. Another hand covered his mouth. The struggle lasted less than 3 seconds. Then silence. His body slowly slid to the floor. Elena crouched beside him. Her expression remained calm, professional, like someone performing a familiar task. She removed his radio. 2 down, she whispered quietly. Across the hospital, the leader suddenly heard the transmission. His face hardened. Well, he muttered slowly. So it's true. One of his men looked confused. What's true? The leader smiled coldly. That ghost we've been hearing about? His eyes drifted toward the dark hallway. Is very much alive. And somewhere in the shadows of Mercy Valley Hospital, Elena Carter was just getting started. And what these men still didn't understand, was that the quiet nurse they had threatened was about to turn their entire operation into a war zone. The first body hadn't even hit the floor before Elena was already moving again. She dragged the unconscious gunman into an empty supply closet and shut the door quietly. His radio crackled weakly in her hand. Team 2, report. Silence. Team 2, the voice repeated. Elena pressed the transmit button and lowered her voice. Hallway clear. The pause on the other end was brief. Then the man replied, Copy. She clipped the radio to her pocket and moved deeper into the hallway. Her heartbeat stayed steady. Years of training had drilled that calm into her bones. Stay quiet. Stay invisible. Control the battlefield. Down the hall, the second attacker crept forward with his rifle raised. Where the hell did Davis go? He whispered into his radio. No answer. He moved past a nurse's station. Behind him, Elena stepped silently out of the shadows. Her hand shot forward. She grabbed his arm, twisted sharply, and drove his shoulder into the counter. The rifle clattered to the floor. What the? Her forearm locked around his throat. Quiet, she whispered. The man struggled, but the hold tightened. 3 seconds later, he collapsed. Elena lowered him slowly to the ground. Another radio, another weapon. She checked the hallway. Still clear. But she knew this wouldn't stay quiet for long. Back in the lobby, Victor Kane frowned as he checked his watch. 2 minutes, he muttered. One of his men shifted nervously. Still nothing from Team 2. Victor's jaw tightened. He lifted his radio. All units, report status. Static. Then a voice from the second floor answered. Floor 2 secure. Victor nodded slowly, but the hallway team remained silent. His eyes narrowed. Well, he said calmly, looks like our ghost is awake. One of the gunmen frowned. Ghost? Victor glanced toward the dark corridors of the hospital. You boys ever hear about a SEAL operator named Elena Carter? The man shook his head. Victor smiled faintly. Didn't think so. He leaned against the reception desk. She was part of a classified team. One of the best infiltration specialists the Navy ever trained. Another gunman looked uneasy. What happened to her? Victor's voice dropped slightly. Her entire team died during a mission in Syria 6 years ago. Dead? That's what everyone thought. Victor tapped the radio. Until tonight. The gunmen exchanged nervous looks. Back in the hallway, Elena reached the corner leading toward Marcus's room. She paused. 2 attackers stood outside room 14. They were talking quietly. You think Kane's right? One of them asked. About what? That Carter woman. The other man shrugged. Urban legend? Military ghost stories? Elena leaned against the wall and listened. She supposedly wiped out an entire insurgent camp by herself, the first man said. The other chuckled. Yeah, right. Their laughter faded quickly, because Elena stepped around the corner. Evening, she said calmly. Both men froze. One raised his rifle. Too late. Elena kicked the weapon sideways and slammed her elbow into his jaw. The second man fired wildly. The shot shattered a window. Elena grabbed a rolling medical cart and shoved it forward. The cart smashed into him and pinned him against the wall. She grabbed his rifle. The hallway went silent again. Inside the room, Marcus Hale slowly pushed himself upright in the hospital bed. He stared at Elena through the doorway. You're not just a nurse, he said weakly. Elena didn't answer immediately. She checked the hallway again, then stepped inside and shut the door. Marcus studied her face. I knew it, he said quietly. She walked over and handed him a pistol taken from one of the attackers. You can shoot? Marcus nodded slowly. Former intelligence? She wasn't surprised. Good, she said. Marcus studied her again. You're Elena Carter. She paused. So you've heard the name? Marcus let out a weak laugh. Everyone in the intelligence community has. She turned toward the door again. You shouldn't be here, Marcus said. They're not just mercenaries. I know. Marcus shook his head. No, you don't understand. He leaned forward. They weren't sent just for me. Elena finally looked at him. What do you mean? Marcus's voice dropped. They were sent for you. Her expression hardened. Marcus continued. That mission in Syria, the one where your team died. Elena's jaw tightened. Yes. Marcus held her gaze. It wasn't an accident. The words hung in the air. What are you talking about? She asked quietly. Marcus swallowed. You and your team walked into a trap. Elena's mind flashed back instantly. Gunfire in the desert, radio silence, her teammates falling one by one. The memory burned. "Who said it?" she asked. Marcus met her eyes. "Your own government." The room went completely silent. For the first time that night, Elena felt something crack beneath her calm. Marcus continued. "They buried the operation. Classified everything." "And me?" she asked. "They assumed you died with the rest." Elena turned away slowly. "So tonight?" Marcus nodded. "Someone realized you're still alive." Her eyes hardened again. "And they want to fix that mistake." Gunfire suddenly erupted down the hallway. Voices shouted. "They're moving!" Marcus looked toward the door. Elena grabbed her rifle again. "How many left?" she asked. Marcus thought for a moment. "At least 6. Elena nodded once. "Good." Marcus stared at her. "Good?" She checked the weapon. "Less work." Marcus couldn't help smiling slightly. "You really are her." Elena looked at him. "No," she said quietly. "I'm what they created." Footsteps thundered down the hallway. One of the attackers shouted, "Room 14, move!" Elena moved to the door and took position beside it. Marcus gripped the pistol with shaking hands. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded. The door handle started to turn. The attackers had finally found them. Because what happens next inside this hospital is where the real war begins. The door burst open. 2 gunmen rushed inside. Elena fired first. The first man dropped instantly. The second dove behind the cabinet and returned fire. Marcus fired twice from the bed. The bullets shattered the cabinet. The gunman staggered. Elena moved fast. She kicked the cabinet aside and slammed the attacker into the wall. The fight ended quickly, but outside the room, more footsteps approached. Victor Kane's voice echoed down the hallway. "Carter!" Elena froze. She recognized that voice instantly. Marcus looked at her. "You know him?" Her expression turned cold. "Yes." Victor's voice grew louder. "I know you're in there." Elena stepped toward the doorway slowly. Marcus whispered urgently, "Don't." But she already knew. This wasn't just an attack anymore. This was personal. Victor Kane's shadow appeared in the hallway. Well, he said calmly. "Elena Carter." He smiled slowly. "I've been looking forward to this reunion." Elena raised her rifle. Victor didn't even flinch. "You should have stayed dead," he said. Her eyes locked onto his. "Funny," she replied quietly. "I was just about to say the same thing." And in that moment, the quiet hospital hallway officially became a battlefield. And the war that destroyed Elena Carter's past was finally about to explode into the open. Victor Kane didn't raise his weapon. He simply stood there in the hallway, calm, almost amused, as if he had walked into a long-awaited meeting. "Elena Carter," he said slowly. 6 years. Elena stepped forward just enough to see him clearly through the doorway. Her voice was steady. "You should have stayed buried, Kane." Victor chuckled softly. "That's the thing about ghosts," he said. "They always come back." Behind him, 4 armed men spread out across the corridor, rifles ready. Marcus watched from the hospital bed, gripping the pistol tightly. His breathing was uneven, but his eyes were sharp. "You don't have the numbers," he muttered. Elena didn't respond. Victor tilted his head slightly. "You know," he continued, "when we heard you survived Syria, the people who sent me were very surprised." Elena's jaw tightened. "You sold us out." Victor shrugged. "Orders. You murdered my team." "Technically," Victor corrected calmly, "your government murdered your team." The words landed like a knife. For a moment, Elena's grip on the rifle tightened. Victor saw it. He smiled. "You still remember them, don't you?" he said softly. Elena said nothing, but the memories came anyway. Dust storms, radio chatter, her team laughing before the mission, then the ambush. Gunfire everywhere, no air support, no extraction, just betrayal. Victor's voice cut through the silence again. "You were never supposed to make it out of that desert." Elena finally spoke. "And yet, here I am." Victor nodded. "Yes, and that's why tonight has become such a problem." Behind him, one of the gunmen shifted nervously. "Boss, we should just take the shot." Victor raised a hand. "No." His eyes stayed locked on Elena. "This deserves a conversation," Marcus whispered from the bed. "He's stalling." Elena knew. Victor stepped closer. "You disappeared for 6 years," he said. "New identity. Quiet hospital job." He looked around the hallway. Very peaceful. Then his expression darkened. "But people like us don't get peaceful endings." Elena's voice dropped. "I'm not like you." Victor laughed. "You were trained exactly like me." He pointed at the bodies in the hallway. "And judging by tonight, you still are." Elena didn't deny it, because he wasn't wrong. Victor's eyes flicked toward Marcus. "You're protecting the wrong man, Carter." Marcus stiffened. Elena glanced back at him. "What does he mean?" Victor smiled. "Did he tell you why we're really here?" Marcus quickly shook his head. "Elena, don't listen to him." Victor continued. "Marcus Hale didn't just discover the conspiracy that killed your team." Elena's eyes narrowed. "He helped create it." The room went silent. Marcus shouted from the bed. "That's not true!" Victor laughed again. "Oh, it's very true." He looked back at Elena. Marcus was the intelligence analyst who signed off on the mission intel. Elena slowly turned toward Marcus. Marcus's face had gone pale. "Elena, listen to me." "You approved the mission," she said quietly. Marcus swallowed. "I didn't know it was a trap." Victor clapped slowly. "Beautiful." Marcus raised his voice. "I was given falsified satellite data." Victor shrugged. "Maybe." Marcus looked desperately at Elena. "I didn't know they were sending your team into an ambush." Elena studied his face carefully, searching. Marcus continued quickly. "I found the evidence afterward. That's why they're hunting me." Victor shook his head. "That's a very convenient story." Marcus shouted back. "You're the one who led the attack." Victor's smile faded slightly. "Because someone had to clean up the mess." The tension in the room thickened. Elena's mind raced. 6 years of questions, 6 years of anger. And now the truth was standing right in front of her. Or at least, 2 different versions of it. Victor spread his arms slightly. "So, here's the deal." His voice became cold again. "You step outside, and I let the hospital staff live." Marcus shouted immediately. "Elena, don't!" Victor ignored him. "You and I settle this," he said. Elena's eyes narrowed. "You think I trust your word?" Victor smirked. "No." He lifted his rifle slightly. "But you trust your odds." The hallway behind him was filled with armed men. Marcus was injured. The hospital staff were trapped. Elena knew exactly what he was doing, forcing her hand. Marcus whispered urgently, "You can't fight all of them." Elena's expression hardened. She stepped toward the doorway. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Elena!" She looked at him. "If what you said is true, then this ends tonight." Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "And if it's not?" Elena didn't answer. She stepped into the hallway. Victor smiled. I knew you would. Behind him, the gunmen raised their rifles. Victor raised a hand. No. They hesitated. You heard me, Victor said calmly. Lower them. Reluctantly, they did. Victor stepped forward until he stood only 10 feet from Elena. This is better, he said, just like old times. Elena's voice was quiet. You always liked talking too much? Victor chuckled. And you always liked breaking things. For a moment, the hallway was completely silent. Two former operatives, both trained to survive anything, both standing in the wreckage of a hospital under siege. Victor tilted his head slightly. You know what the funny part is? Elena didn't respond. They never expected you to live long enough to learn the truth. His eyes sharpened. But if you die tonight, the secret stays buried. Elena raised the rifle slightly. And if you die? Victor smiled again. Then the people above me will send someone worse. The tension snapped. Victor moved first. His hand shot for his pistol. Elena fired instantly. The gunshot thundered through the hallway. Victor dove behind a wall as the bullet shattered the tiles beside him. Now! He shouted. The remaining gunmen opened fire. The hallway exploded with gunfire. Marcus fired from inside the room. One attacker dropped. Another dove for cover. Elena slid behind a medical cart as bullets tore through the walls. Glass shattered. Lights flickered. Screams echoed from distant hospital rooms. Victor's voice shouted over the chaos. Take her down! Two attackers rushed forward. Elena rolled out from cover and fired twice. Both men collapsed. Marcus shouted from inside the room. 3 left! Victor reappeared at the end of the hallway. He fired a burst from his rifle. Elena ducked as bullets ripped through the cart. Victor laughed over the gunfire. This is what you were built for. Elena rose from cover and fired again. Victor barely dodged the shot. The hallway had become a war zone. Smoke filled the air. Bullet casings scattered across the floor. And in the middle of it all, Elena Carter moved like a soldier who had never truly left the battlefield. The final shots rang out. One last attacker fell. Silence slowly returned. Victor Kane stood at the far end of the corridor, wounded, bleeding from his shoulder, but still smiling. Well, he said quietly, looks like it's just us again. Elena raised her rifle. Victor slowly dropped his weapon, but his smile never faded. Go ahead, he said. Pull the trigger. Behind her, Marcus spoke weakly. Elena, wait. Victor laughed softly. Yes, he said. Listen to him. Because what Elena didn't know yet was that the final truth behind the mission that destroyed her team was far worse than either of them had told her. And the decision she was about to make would change everything. Marcus's voice cut through the smoke-filled hallway. Elena, wait. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Victor Kane stood 10 feet away, blood slowly spreading through his sleeve, but the smile on his face hadn't faded. Listen to him, Victor said calmly. Elena didn't lower the rifle. Give me one reason. Marcus struggled to sit up in the hospital bed behind her. Because if you kill him now, you'll never know the truth. Victor chuckled. See? Even the analyst understands leverage. Elena's eyes never left Victor. Talk, she said coldly. Victor slowly raised his empty hands. You're pointing the gun at the wrong person. Marcus scoffed. Don't believe a word he says. Victor glanced over Elena's shoulder toward Marcus. Oh, I think she should hear this. He shifted slightly against the wall, wincing from the pain in his shoulder. Your team in Syria. They weren't the target. Elena's voice was sharp. They were betrayed. Victor nodded. Yes, but not by me. Marcus shouted from the room. That's a lie! Victor ignored him. You remember the coordinates for the mission? He asked Elena. She didn't answer, but the memories flashed through her mind instantly. A remote compound in the desert. Intel reports claiming a high-level terrorist leader was hiding there. Her team had moved in fast. Then, the ambush. Victor spoke quietly. That compound wasn't an enemy base. Elena's eyes narrowed. It was a CIA black site. Marcus froze. Victor continued. An illegal detention facility. Off the books. The hallway seemed to grow colder. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. You're lying. Victor shook his head slowly. Your team was sent in as a cleanup operation. Marcus shouted again. No! That's not how it happened. Victor smirked. Marcus approved the intel packet. Elena slowly turned her head toward the hospital room. Marcus's face had gone pale. Elena. I didn't know, he said quickly. I swear I didn't know what that location really was. Victor laughed. That's the best part. He looked back at Elena. Marcus didn't know. You didn't know. Your entire team didn't know. Elena's voice hardened. Then who did? Victor's smile faded slightly. The people above us. Silence filled the hallway. Sirens began faintly in the distance outside the hospital. Police. Victor heard them too. Looks like our time is almost up, he said calmly. Elena stepped closer, the rifle still aimed at his chest. Names. Victor studied her face. You really want to go down that road? Her voice didn't shake. They killed my team. Victor nodded slowly. Yes. He leaned his head back against the wall. And if you learn who ordered it, you won't be able to go back to being a nurse. Elena didn't blink. That life ended 6 years ago, Marcus whispered from the room. Elena, don't do this. Victor spoke again. The operation was authorized by a joint task force. Elena waited. Victor's eyes darkened. Pentagon Intelligence Division. Marcus closed his eyes. And the CIA, Victor added. The weight of those words hung in the air. Elena's grip tightened around the rifle. Victor continued quietly. They used your SEAL team to destroy evidence. Her voice was low. And you? Victor shrugged slightly. I was hired to make sure nobody survived the operation. The truth landed like a hammer. 6 years. 6 years believing the mission had simply gone wrong. 6 years blaming herself. Victor studied her carefully. You weren't supposed to live, Elena. She didn't answer. The sirens outside were getting louder now. Police vehicles were surrounding the hospital. Victor glanced toward the sound. Well, he said calmly, this is usually where our stories end. Elena's rifle never moved. Victor gave a small shrug. If it helps, your team fought well. That was the wrong thing to say. Elena pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the hallway. Victor Kane collapsed to the floor. The silence that followed felt heavy. Marcus stared in shock. Elena. She lowered the rifle slowly. Her face showed no relief, no victory, just quiet certainty. Marcus looked at Victor's body. You could have kept him alive. He could have testified. Elena turned toward the window at the end of the corridor. Police lights flashed red and blue across the hospital walls. He already told me everything I needed to know, she said. Marcus shook his head. You don't understand how powerful the people behind this are. Elena glanced back at him. I do now. Footsteps rushed up the stairs as police teams entered the building. Voices shouted orders. "Police, drop your weapons!" Elena calmly placed the rifle on the floor and raised her hands. Officers flooded the hallway. They quickly secured the area. One of them looked at the bodies scattered across the corridor. "What the hell happened here?" No one answered. Marcus was placed on a stretcher and rushed toward the elevator. As they passed Elena, he looked at her. "What are you going to do now?" She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes drifted toward the body of Victor Kane lying on the floor, then toward the dark hallway beyond. 6 years ago, her team had died believing they were serving their country. 6 years of lies. 6 years of silence. Elena finally spoke. "Now I find the people who gave the order." Marcus stared at her. "You can't fight them alone." She gave a faint, cold smile. "I won't be alone." Outside the hospital, dozens of police vehicles filled the parking lot. News helicopters circled above. The night air was filled with flashing lights and chaos. Elena Carter stepped out of the building, surrounded by officers. But her mind was already somewhere else, somewhere far beyond this hospital, somewhere much higher up the chain of command, because tonight had only revealed the first layer of the truth. And the people responsible for destroying her team were still out there, watching, hiding, believing their secret was still safe. They were wrong. As Elena looked up at the flashing lights in the sky, one thought ran through her mind. The war that started 6 years ago had just begun again. And this time, she wasn't the one walking into the trap. If you enjoyed this story and want to see part 2, where Elena hunts down the powerful people behind the conspiracy, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling us what you think really happened to her team. Because the deeper Elena digs into the truth, the more dangerous the enemies she's about to face. And the next battle won't take place in a hospital.